I was 30 minutes late for Thanksgiving. My husband Arthur had been gone 4 years by then, and every holiday since had turned into the same quiet drive across Maple Ridge to my daughter Sarah's house on Birchwood Court. That night a flat tire on my old Buick set me back, and no matter how hard I scrubbed at the gas station sink, a smear of grease stayed pressed into the creases of my thumb. The porch light was on when I got there. The dining room window was cracked an inch, letting the warmth and the clink of glasses spill out into the cold. I raised my hand to the doorbell. Then I stopped. Through the gap in the curtain, I could see Sarah standing at the head of her own table, a glass of red wine in her hand, wine I had almost certainly paid for. Greg sat beside her, swirling his glass the way he did when he wanted an audience. "To a peaceful Thanksgiving," Sarah said, and her voice carried clean into the yard. "And honestly, it's better when Mom doesn't come to these things. She brings the mood down. All she talks about is the garden, or Dad. It's exhausting." Greg laughed and tapped his glass against hers. "Amen to that. We only invite her because we need her to co-sign the house loan next month," Sarah went on. "Once that's done, we can finally get some space." I stood on the walkway in the cold, and I did not cry. Something colder than grief moved through me instead. Flat and clear, like the moment a fever finally breaks. For 3 years I had been their built-in babysitter, their emergency fund, their quiet backup account. I was 66 years old. I was done being a stepping stone. Now, let me back up and tell you who I used to be before that window, because the woman who sat down at that table was not the same one who'd been standing outside it 30 seconds earlier. I spent 31 years as a bookkeeper for a heating and cooling company on Route 9. The kind of job where a penny out of place kept you up at night. I still balance my checkbook by hand. I still keep a black leather ledger in the kitchen drawer. The one Arthur gave me the year we got married, its corners worn soft as fabric. Old habit, I used to tell people. Arthur used to say I could account for a nickel from 1987 if you gave me a minute. Arthur was the one who taught me to write things down. "Measure twice," he'd say, holding up whatever he was fixing that weekend. "Numbers don't lie to you, Rosemary. People do. But numbers don't." He'd been a structural inspector for the county for 30 years, and after he passed, I kept doing what he taught me without really noticing I was doing it. Every check I wrote Sarah and Greg, for the kids' braces, for a security deposit, for the used minivan. I logged it in that ledger out of habit, the way another woman might say a prayer. I never once expected to need it. I wiped the last of the grease off my thumb, opened the door without knocking, and walked into the dining room like nothing had happened. I smiled at my daughter across that table. "Traffic was terrible," I said, "but I'm glad I made it." Then I looked her dead in the eye and said the only thing that mattered. "I'm putting the house on the market tomorrow. I'm closing our joint accounts on Monday. I won't be helping with your loan." Sarah's face went the color of the tablecloth. The silence after was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. Greg's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. I pulled out my chair, laid my napkin across my lap, and served myself a modest spoonful of mashed potatoes. "Mom," Sarah finally managed her voice then. "How long were you standing out there?" "Long enough to know exactly where I stand in this family," I said, and I kept my voice level. There was no need to raise it. The truth was loud enough on its own. Greg cleared his throat and adjusted the watch on his wrist. A gift I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago, when he made regional manager. "Rosemary, let's not be hasty. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. Hosting is stressful." He wasn't always like that. I want to be fair about that, because it matters. The first Thanksgiving Sarah brought him home, Greg spent 2 hours under my kitchen sink fixing a leak Arthur never got around to, and refused to take a dime for the part. He remembered my birthday every year without being reminded. When Arthur was in the hospital that last February, Greg drove me there himself at 6 in the morning, so I wouldn't have to sit in that waiting room alone. And he didn't say a word the whole drive, just let me stare out the window. I trusted him because he'd earned it once. That's the part nobody tells you about people who disappoint you. They don't start out disappointing. They start out kind enough that you stop checking. The first time something felt off was a Tuesday in early spring, about 2 years after Arthur died. Sarah called asking to borrow $400 for a car payment, said Greg's bonus was late. I wrote the check without blinking. 2 weeks later I saw her posting pictures from a resort in Sarasota. I told myself it was a work trip. I told myself I didn't have all the details. I told myself a lot of things that spring. By summer it wasn't $400 anymore. It was groceries, then salon visits on a card I'd given her for the kids, then a golf club membership Greg swore was for networking. Each time I felt something tighten in my chest, and each time I talked myself back down. She's my daughter. He's a good provider. This is what family does. Then that September, something shifted, and for a while I let myself believe it had gotten better. Sarah started calling just to talk, not to ask for anything. She brought Emma and Leo by on a Sunday with a bouquet of grocery store daisies, and said she just missed me. Greg fixed my porch step without being asked, the same way he'd fixed that sink years before. For 2 whole months, dinner at their house felt like it used to, back when Arthur was still setting the table and telling Leo not to put his elbows on it. I let my guard down completely that fall. I told myself the hard years were behind us. I didn't know I was standing in the last calm before the window. I woke up the morning after Thanksgiving feeling lighter than I had in years, and that surprised me more than anything Sarah had said. The house Arthur and I bought in 1994 looked different in that morning light. It didn't feel like a waiting room for my daughter's inheritance anymore. It felt like mine again, an asset, not an obligation. At 9 o'clock sharp I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and logged into the bank. With 3 clicks, I moved the entire balance of our joint emergency account, the one only I had ever put money into, over to a new account with just my name on it. Then I canceled the credit card I'd given Sarah for groceries and the kids, the one that had somehow been paying for salon visits and Green's fees at Greg's club. At 10:15, I heard the front door unlock. Sarah let herself in with her spare key, hair pulled back in a messy bun, a travel mug in one hand. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, dropping her purse on the counter. "Greg was up all night. You can't just pull the rug out from under us because your feelings got hurt." "My feelings aren't hurt, Sarah." I closed the laptop and looked up at her. "My eyes are open." I stood, held out my hand. "I need my house key back." She blinked. "What?" "No, Mom, be reasonable. What if there's an emergency? What if you fall?" "If I fall, I'll call an ambulance." My hand stayed out. "I'm selling this house. You don't need access to it anymore." She stared at me like she was searching for the version of me she knew how to move around. That woman wasn't standing in the kitchen anymore. With a huff, she unclipped the brass key from her ring and dropped it on the counter hard enough to spin. "You're ruining our lives over one stupid comment," she muttered. "I'm securing my own life," I said. "Please lock the door behind you." Real estate agent Helen Marsh came through that same afternoon and gave me a number that made me sit up a little straighter. The market on Birchwood Court side of town was hot, and Arthur had kept that house in better shape than most men keep a truck. By Friday there was a sign staked in the front lawn. Saturday afternoon my phone rang. Greg's name on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. "Rosemary." "No, hello. Did you cancel the credit card?" "I did. Friday morning." Behind him I could hear silverware, soft jazz, somewhere nice, judging by the sound of it. I'm standing at the register at the Oak Room trying to pay for a business lunch, and my card was declined. It's humiliating. "It's not your card, Greg. It's mine." I closed it. "We had an arrangement," he hissed, voice dropping so the table behind him wouldn't hear. "You help with daily expenses so we can save for the new house." That arrangement ended at Thanksgiving. I watered my ferns with the little copper can while I said it. "You're a grown man with a salary. Pay for your own lunch." "You're being incredibly petty." "No," I said. "I'm being financially responsible. Good luck with the bill." I set the phone down. 10 minutes later Sarah called. I let it go to silence and went back to sorting through Arthur's old books in the study, the ones I hadn't touched in 4 years. For 3 years I had told myself that bending over backward for them was what a good mother did. I understood now that I had only been teaching them I would always bend. A boundary doesn't make you petty. It makes you free. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I found myself actually looking forward to tomorrow. Sunday brought a soft knock instead of a demand, and that alone told me something was different before I even opened the door. It was my son Daniel. Unlike Sarah, Daniel had never once asked me for a dime. He taught high school biology an hour away, and he'd built a quiet, steady life with his wife that never seemed to need propping up. He pulled me into a hug and handed me a paper bag that smelled like cinnamon. Fresh rolls, he said, stepping inside, then stopping at the sight of half-packed boxes lining the hallway. So Sarah wasn't exaggerating. You're really selling the place. I started the coffee pot. Did she call you? Called me crying yesterday. Said you'd gone crazy, cut off their cards, took the house key back. He pulled out a stool. Wanted me to drive down and talk sense into you. And are you here to talk sense into me? Daniel looked around the kitchen he'd grown up eating breakfast in. Mom, I'm here to help you pack. It's about time you stopped letting them treat you like an ATM. Dad would have put a stop to it years ago. Arthur would have. That much I knew for certain. I found a 2-bedroom condo near the lake, I told him. No stairs, no yard work. No room for permanent house guests. Daniel nodded, satisfied. Good. Just be ready. Greg's not going to let that equity go without a fight. He thinks this house is his retirement plan. He can think what he likes, I said. His name isn't on the deed. Mine is. Tuesday morning I was wrapping the good china in bubble wrap when a horn sounded in the driveway. Sarah marched up the front steps with Emma and Leo trailing behind her, and rang the bell before I'd even reached the door. I have a spa day booked, she said, pushing past me to herd the kids inside. It's been planned for months. I need you to watch them until 4. The old version of me would have cancelled everything and said yes before she finished the sentence. No, I said. Sarah turned around like I'd spoken in a language she didn't recognize. What do you mean no? They're your grandchildren. And I love them. I handed Leo's backpack back to her. But you didn't ask, Sarah. You assumed. I have movers coming in an hour. I can't watch them today. I can't cancel, it's non-refundable. Then find a sitter, or Greg can take the day off. I'm not your on-call nanny anymore. You're punishing the kids to punish me, she snapped, her face flushing. I didn't take the bait. I'll come see them Sunday. I hugged Emma and Leo goodbye, walked Sarah back to the porch, and closed the deadbolt behind her. By Thursday the house stood mostly bare, my footsteps echoing off the hardwood. Greg's car pulled up while I was sweeping the front hall, and he came up the walk with his jaw set like a man walking into a negotiation he expected to win. So you're really doing this, he said, stepping in uninvited. Throwing away the family home. It's my home, I said. Under contract as of this morning. We need to talk numbers, he said, arms crossed, chin lifted. Since you're making a profit off a house Sarah grew up in, it's only fair a portion of that equity comes to us. We factored your help into the new build. I set the broom against the wall. I wasn't afraid of him. I was only tired of how much room he'd always assumed he was owed. You factored my money into your lifestyle, I said. There's no fair portion, Greg. This house is mine. That money is mine. You're getting nothing. You'd leave your own daughter high and dry? His voice rose. Sarah and you bring in $150,000 a year combined, I said, looking him straight in the eye. If you're dry, it's because of the wine and the leased car and the oak room, not because of me. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I don't think anyone had spoken to him that way in a very long time. I have floors to sweep, I said, and pointed to the door. Moving day came on a clear, cold Friday. Daniel took the day off to direct the crew. As the movers carried out Arthur's old reading chair, the last piece left in the house, a familiar car pulled up along the curb. Sarah stepped out, wrapping her coat tight around herself, and stood on the sidewalk watching the house she'd always assumed would someday be hers. Greg's loan got denied yesterday, she said quietly, not looking at me. Without your signature and the cash, our debt-to-income ratio was too high. I felt the old instinct rise in me, the urge to fix it, to make one call, to smooth it over the way I always had. I let it pass through me instead of acting on it. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. You'll have to stay where you are and budget. He blames me, she said. Says if I hadn't made that toast we'd be fine. He's wrong, I said gently but without give. The toast didn't cause this, Sarah. It just opened my eyes. The problem was never one comment. It was 3 years of being treated like a resource instead of a person. She didn't argue. She wiped one tear off her cheek and said nothing else. I didn't reach for her. Some boundaries have to stay solid even when it costs you something to hold them. A week later, settled into my new condo by the lake, I thought the worst of it was behind me. I was wrong. The following Tuesday evening, the doorbell rang. It was Sarah and Greg. I hesitated with my hand on the lock, then opened the door and stood in the frame without inviting them past it. Greg tried on a smile that didn't quite hold. Rosemary, the place looks cozy. We came to apologize, Sarah said, a little too fast. We've had a rough few weeks. We want to make things right. We miss you, Mom. The kids miss you. I miss the kids too, I said. But apologies usually come with a request. What is it, Greg? His smile dropped. We've got a tax bill due next week. We're short. A $10,000 loan, Rosemary, from the house sale. We'll pay you back with interest. I didn't sigh. I didn't raise my voice. I reached over to the console table by the door and picked up the black leather notebook Arthur had given me 30-some years earlier. Its cover soft at the corners from decades of handling. I flipped to a dog-eared page and held it out to Greg. What is this? He asked, scanning the neat columns. A record of every loan, every emergency payment, every credit card bill I've covered for the two of you over the last 3 years. I kept my voice even. $47,500. Not 1 cent of it has ever come back to me. Sarah looked over his shoulder and went the color of the porch light. Arthur used to say numbers don't lie to you. People do. I'd carried that with me for 4 years without needing it for anything more than balancing a checkbook. That night, sitting in that little leather notebook, it finally did what he always said it would. The bank is closed, Greg, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You'll figure out your own taxes. Sell the car. Cancel the club membership. But don't come to my door asking for money again. I took the notebook back out of his hand. Good night, both of you. I closed the door until the latch clicked and slid the deadbolt into place. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that because it would be easy to tell you I did. I felt something quieter, like setting down a bag I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it had a weight to it at all. 6 months is long enough to find out whether a change in yourself was real, or just a mood that Thanksgiving put you in. Winter melted into a bright, easy spring. Life in the condo settled into something I hadn't had in years. A gardening club on Thursdays, novels read straight through on the balcony. A painting class Daniel talked me into that I was embarrassingly bad at. Without the constant pull of Sarah and Greg's spending, my savings grew back the way a lawn grows back after a drought finally breaks. My shoulders stopped living up around my ears. It was a Sunday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I found Sarah standing there alone, holding a Tupperware container. Hi, Mom, she said softly, shifting her weight on the mat. I made that lasagna you like. I thought maybe we could have lunch. Just us. I studied her for a moment. She wasn't carrying the designer bag anymore. Her hair was simple. She looked tired in a way that seemed more honest than the exhaustion I remembered from before. Like someone finally carrying their own weight instead of setting it down on someone else. Daniel had told me Greg wasn't happy about the belt tightening the last 6 months had forced on them. He'd also told me Sarah was learning, slowly, to tell Greg no. Just lunch, I said. Not a question. A boundary stated plainly, the way I'd learned to state everything now. Just lunch, she agreed. No favors. No va visiting requests. I really just want to see my mom. I stepped back and let the door swing open. Come on in. I'll put the kettle on. We sat at my small table and ate lasagna and talked about nothing that mattered. My painting class, Leo's science fair project, Emma's new front tooth. It wasn't the tearful, sweeping reconciliation you see in movies. All forgiven in a single hug. Trust doesn't rebuild that fast, and I wasn't interested in pretending it did. But it was a start, and a start was more than I'd let myself hope for back in November. While she washed the dishes at my sink, because in my house now, guests help clean up. I looked out at the lake and thought about that window on Birchwood Court, the one I almost didn't stop in front of. I hadn't destroyed my family by walking through that door and sitting down to dinner anyway. I had saved myself. And in doing it quietly, without a single raised voice, I had finally forced the people around me to grow up alongside me. I still keep that black leather notebook in a kitchen drawer, the same as I always did. I don't need it for loans anymore. I use it now to write down the small things, the date Emma lost her tooth, the recipe for the lasagna Sarah finally asked me to teach her, the first Thursday my tomato plants came in. Numbers don't lie to you. People do. Arthur was right about that, same as he was right about most things. But I've learned something he never got to see me learn, that the people who lie to you can also eventually tell you the truth, if you stop making it so easy for them not to.